My name is Michael French. This is Melinda Mock. We are RetroBlasting. We are a web channel. We've been around since May of 2012. We talk about pop culture. We talk about toys, cartoons. We do it with a kind of, fully scripted, edited, post-produced pieces. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of kick this off with just sort of an informal survey. What do you all see when you look at this photograph? I mean, you can say anything. It is a transformer.
Half shifted.
It's what?
Half shifted.
Half shifted.
Does it look salvageable?
C4, condition 4. See, that's a collector right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Would you buy it? I mean, would you spend a lot of money on it? Would you, you know?
Okay, now what if I, and you already know this, clearly you're a collector. What if I told you that it would take over $100 in parts to restore this piece? And then what if I told you that you could get one complete and in mint condition for probably about that price? Would you do it?
That's no different than a classic car. It's cheaper to buy
right.
somebody else's work than to pay for it yourself.
Now, okay, that's correct. Now what if I threw in the curveball that this was the one you had since you were a very little child that was given to you in the Christmas of 1984, and it was your favorite toy of all time? Now what would you do?
To fix it.
These are kind of the questions that we ask ourselves as toy restoration people. We do this as a hobby. We don't do this for a business, but we think about these things all the time. And Melinda can tell you that there have been a number of toys, because I've kept all the ones I've had since I was a kid. There are just a number of toys out there in my collection that I'm like, you know what? It's going to cost me an arm and a leg, but this is the one I opened when I was 7. And I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, or this is the one my dad gave me at that special birthday, and it really has personal meaning for me. So even though it's not really worth anything to anyone else. So we do a lot of videos about restoration. Amongst our sort of comedic videos, we show people, you know, what it is to sort of go in and fix the mechanics of toys and visually make them look more presentable for display and that sort of thing. And so part of what we're going to be talking about today is, you know, there's a spectrum of fixing up a toy. Like, when do you cross that line of sort of making it a new toy or going too far where you're almost damaging the toy and its original integrity and what it is? So it's sort of a tricky line sometimes to walk. Our goals are to describe types of restorations that you can do or that can be done to things that you're looking at buying, and then discuss if you should do those things. So there's sort of 3 main types of restoration in our minds of what we're talking about. So one is functional restoration, and that's when you've got, it can be anything from like an arm that's not moving because it's melted together, or it could be you know, the mechanics inside, the electronics inside of an old Kenner toy from Star Wars that no longer works, and so you have to go in there and try to figure out why is this not working. We've got cosmetic restoration, which I do a lot of for my ponies. You know, you can wash things, you can, you know, but you can take that really far. Like, you can get repro stickers, you can, you know, rehair things, you can do all kinds of stuff. And then there's completion, where you're talking about what we were just mentioning, where you get a playset or even a figure, and you want to, you know, get the guns to fill it out so you have a complete example of that toy. So like I said, these things occur on a spectrum. So you've got cosmetic restoration. A very simple version of that is cleaning. That could be anything from just taking a Q-tip and just really delicately cleaning it off, all the way to repainting something. And this is sort of what we're talking about. How far over on the spectrum can we go before we're completely devaluing it, or before we're making it, you know,
before we're making alterations to it that make it not original. And there's many arguments about that. So functional restorations, of course, are going into the existing mechanics and repairing them to make sure that everything functions properly. It's not really modifying it in any way that makes it unoriginal so much as it is bringing it back to that original state. So in the case of the first photo, this is a vintage Kenner Tatooine skiff from the Power of the Force line from 1985. When I received it, it was complete. It was a complete example. Didn't have the box, but it was a complete example. But the lever arms that control the landing gears were just grinding and nothing was happening. And so I was like, something's going on with this. So, of course, you open these toys up and you figure out how their mechanisms work. And then you button everything back up, and you're good to go. You haven't really changed anything. Now, if someone out there really wants to know, has this toy ever been disassembled, then I guess you got to tell them, but I really don't think that's what's going on. In the case of G.I. Joe and He-Man, of course, we all know about the infamous rubber connectors for the legs and for the body and the waist pieces. Those, you're on a ticking time bomb with those. Somebody online, I think they're actually called Starbase Atlanta, they sell the Ertl figures for Star Trek 3. They're G.I. Joe style with the O-ring construction, and they're kind of more obscure. But the funny part is they're on the card, and half of them are on the card split in half because the O-rings have dry rotted, and then they're just in there. And it's like Kirk's legs are up against his head because it's just in a pile at the bottom of the bubble. And some people say, well, that's mint on card. It's like, yeah, but it's broken, like in there. Like, don't you want to?
I guess that goes back to what is it that you want to do with your collection? Is it something that you just want to sort of have that feeling of completion, like I have the complete mint on card, fill in the blank, or do you want to be able to display it, or do you want it to,
Right. So this is a restoration that we did. This is the Mask Raven from 1986. It's from Kenner Toys, and the cool thing about these is that when you go into some of these restorations, you have to mentally prepare yourself for the mechanisms that you're going to find inside. If you are not I'm not really of an engineering mind. I can change my tires and put air in them and stuff. But up until I started repairing my toys from when I was a kid, I was never really mechanically inclined, and that's something that's almost like a trial by fire. So this piece has a firing razor blade mechanism on the front. It has all these spring-loaded twisting and turning parts on the back and the front. The hood twists around 180 degrees, but it all wasn't working. It all felt very crusty. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take a shot of whiskey and I'm going to get the screwdriver out. I'm going to go for it. So here's what we found. So that's it in all of its separate components, and it's one of the most intimidating things that you'll ever see when you're doing some of these toys. Mask toys are notorious for this because they had so many little mechanisms and they were all miniature compared to other scales. And I found myself staring at 50 pieces, going, well, I hope the cat doesn't jump up here because then I'm going to be really in trouble.
I was going to say, how did you keep your pieces, especially the little ones, organized so you knew where they all went to put it back together?
I put this.
Ziplocs are your friend.
Yeah.
Ziplocs are your friend.
Ziplocs are your friend, and screws always stay together. Sometimes there's those screws back then. You never really know if ones from the exterior are a micron shorter or longer than the ones from the interior. So I would actually segregate those based on where they came from on the toy, even though visually they look the same. I was like, you know what? I ain't taking no chances. And if I could, and it's too numerous sometimes to really do this, but if I could, I'd try and put the same screws back in the same holes, because you never know how those screws bit into the plastic when you were redoing them. So this is a mechanism that is inside the Mask Raven. And I'm going to tell you, to this day, I haven't figured out exactly how that works. I just know it does. So that vertical spring that kind of cones out, that's what shoots the razor blades out of the front. And you can put two razor blades in the front at the same time and hide them in the hood, but it'll only shoot one at a time. Do I know how that works? No, I just know it wasn't working. So I decided to just clean the rust off of the springs and try and put everything back together. Yes, and so this is the cleaned assembly on the lower side of the car, the undercarriage. And you can see that there are 4 springs there, not including the 2 that I just showed you. I mean, the whole thing is just like a slinky on crack. Like, it's just this crazy item. So this is one. This one's kind of interesting. I'm a firm believer in making sure that you do functional restorations on your pieces that don't affect their parts, their aesthetic, or anything like that. You don't want to intentionally damage anything. I mean, if you're a customizer and you want to respray a G.I. Joe hovercraft and make it camouflage or Arctic, whatever, that's fine. But I'm not like that. I like bringing them back to their original look. The problem is that sometimes I run into situations where the cost, like you were talking about, is I don't want to pay the freight on it. And I'm like, I don't even see how anyone would do this. Case in point, this is the vintage G.I. Joe hovercraft steering vanes. This is a lot of them that I got off eBay. All of them are in some way broken because they involved 2 parts one part moved like this, and it was on a little piece of plastic attached to this piece, and that little piece of plastic was about as thin as a Ziploc bag, and it would just tear off, and then you wouldn't have steering vanes anymore. To get a complete assembly of those, if you can find one separate from the vehicle itself, is probably going to cost you between $60 and $100, depending on the seller and how many people you're fighting over it for. So what I did was I found a lot of ones that were in various states of repair or disrepair, picked out the ones I liked, and then I used brass hinges and created a set that worked again. Now, this is a situation where I knew that I was not going to have a unit that was, when it was done, that looked like the original Hasbro version. But you have to remember, all of these steering vanes were already broken. They were already busted and couldn't be used anymore. So what I...
Weld them with a hot knife?
What's that?
Weld them back together with a hot knife?
I tried that, but apparently I'm not very talented. So what I did, but I've
about
got
4 more boxes of those things.
Yeah, we have 4 more boxes. If you'd like them, please get my email address. I'll send them to you. And then you can send me a video, and I'm not even challenging. I know you can do it because I can see it on your face. You send me a video showing me that, and I'll feel like this small, but I'll be like, dude, that guy's a badass.
Just put it on YouTube so everybody can see how you do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would rock. I would really appreciate that.
but I mean,
You ever use it to think about getting a 3D printer to reproduce some of those things?
We're going to talk about that.
yeah, yeah.
Jumping the gun there.
No, but your head's in the right place. So this is the finished vehicle that I did for a friend. I was kind of doing my childhood one and another one at the same time. At the end of the day, I'll probably mask off the hinges and spray paint them olive drab. But for the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to show you how I repaired it, make it more obvious. I'll tell you this right now. It's a lot more fun to have working steering vanes that you know won't break than it is to worry about having those hinges on there. But that's me. This is an exception to the rule because it's about cost. Most of the time, though, I would never do this, and I only did it with parts that were already broken. So I would never do this to the existing parts.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about cosmetic restorations, and I have a lot of girls' toys from when I was a kid, and so, you know, I found them recently in an attic that they'd been in for like 20 years or something like that, and so they looked pretty nasty. They were sticky. They had that sticky feeling from a long time in the attic, and so, you know, I started just with these seaweeds, which are actually fairly pricey now to come across because they were bath toys, and so a lot of them are just molded out and nasty looking. Mine happened to be in pretty decent shape. This was some that I had when I was a kid, and their hairstyle's up really well, and so once you start doing that, like with My Little Ponies or things with hair, they clean up amazing. Like their hair just goes right back. You wash it with regular shampoo and conditioner and just set it overnight like us girls used to do when we rolled our hair at night and just left the curlers in, and they look just unbelievably amazing.
And for any guy in the audience right now who thinks that this isn't useful information to them, the Kenner Princess Leia doll from 1977 will one day come into your possession if you're a vintage Star Wars collector, and you will need this information.
Yeah, yeah. One of our viewers sent us this, not with the intention of us fixing it for him, but just wanted, he didn't have the ability and the wherewithal to fix it himself, but it was probably one of his favorite toys as a child, and so he couldn't bear to just sell it for parts on eBay. So he gave it to us and said, you know, here, you guys, you know, keep it in your archive, and, you know, hopefully I'm sending it to a good home. Well, so we got that, and we thought, oh, well, he clearly cares a lot about this toy, even though it looks pretty darn horrible.
Yeah.
But, you know, he played with it hard because he loved it, you know, and that's what you do with a toy when you're a kid. You play hard with it. And so it had that sort of love on it is how we looked at it. And so the whole back end was broken off, and it totally didn't work. And I mean, it was, you know, if you saw it in Goodwill, you'd probably leave it there, you know. But we took it as a challenge to say, hey, can we get this thing fixed and send it back to this guy so he can have his toy that he had when he was a kid?
Can you tell me which one of those was the one that you just saw?
Nope.
It's the one on the left, closest to camera.
I can't. I saw the
With the
video.
bright white label.
Right.
Yeah, we did repro labels.
But those have their own inherent challenges.
Oh my God, they do.
What we did was we did a complete strip down of that thing, and we said, you know what? This is his childhood toy. We're going to do it upright, and we're going to send it back to him. He didn't ask for it back, but we're going to send it back to him. And in doing so, we said, well, this toy, as you saw from show them the previous photo again, it looked like it had been, you know, thrown in the dirt 20 times. Everything had been busted off. The back end had been busted off. The electronics didn't work. It was toast. And you can see the marks on it, like someone stepped on it or used it as like the foot of their bunk bed. Like it was just this crazy thing. All this, yeah, all the stickers were gone. I mean, they were
Or
if
if they weren't gone, they were really in bad condition.
Right.
So we figured at that point the toy was basically a write-off anyway, so there wasn't a lot we could do to it that would mess it up.
Yeah, this is so much not. This was an example where what we were doing to it wasn't taking away value; it was actually adding value back. Because
certainly for the person that we did it for.
Right.
So the stickers were so bad, and we had to really scrub that thing because it was filthy. I mean, you could watch the dirt coming off of it. So you really had to almost submerge it once you removed all the electronic pieces and really scrub it down with a toothbrush. And I like to use Dawn soap to really get in there, and it doesn't seem to damage the material, but it does a good job of getting the dirt and grime off. So, yeah. So this, were you finished talking about the speeder?
Yeah.
So I got a...
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I did want to say one thing. I apologize. One of the things you got to remember about repro stickers when you're doing these, just as a tip, is that especially when it comes to Star Wars, with G.I. Joe and Transformers, they have this amazing network of people out there who have recreated those stickers completely accurately. Like they're on the transparencies, they're the same color, they're the same sheets. They look amazing. The hovercraft that I just showed you that I had restored for my friend, all those stickers on there are reproductions. In the case of this, they're of course reproductions, but the Star Wars reproduction sticker industry, if I could be so liberal as to call it that, is horrible. Like, you would think that with Star Wars having such a huge following, that they would have just as much of a resource as G.I. Joe or Transformers fans to have these amazing die-cut sticker sheets. And they don't. You print them off from the internet, from scans like these PDFs. You print them out of Photoshop, and then you just kind of cut them out with a razor blade and kind of use a magnifying glass to see the actual die-cut lines that were in the sheets and hope for the best. Well, the other thing you won't realize if you don't have any stickers to compare it to, and I've done this with the Snowspeeder, with the Millennium Falcon, and with the Death Star playset, all the sticker sheets, the colors are all wrong. Because whoever scanned them in and put them on the internet was like Mr. Magoo or something. Like they just couldn't see. And they were like, oh, and so like these stickers were all color corrected individually through Photoshop by me pulling my hair out for hours on end trying to get the colors right. And
wasting lots of sticker printer paper,
right,
like trying to see what it's going to look like once you print it off. So.
Right. And so when you hear online this chatter, because there's a lot of chatter about people saying, repro stickers suck, repro stickers are horrible, don't use them. It's generally because they're not actually color correcting them before they print them. And so you can totally tell that they're repros because the colors are all wrong.
But that means you have to have an original example sitting there to compare it to say, is this the right green level in this sticker, you know? So you have to have, it's not like you can just print it off and know.
Right. And in the case of this, the one on the right has all original stickers on it. So we made sure to get it as close as we could. Now, the reason that white one stands out so much compared to the one on the other one is the other one is 30 years old, and the white has dulled. But we really tried to get the stickers as close as we could. And if you do that, if you have to use repros, if you color correct them, you won't have as much regret about it. So take the time.
So one of my fun pony restorations, a friend of mine, his niece had all of these ponies that she didn't want anymore, so he just sent me this huge box full of ponies, and they were in not nearly as good a condition as mine from when I was a kid. So some of them had holes chewed in them from a cat, you know, they were all very dirty. Like this is what you call a so-soft pony, so it has a glue sprayed all over the body, and then this flocking stuff is on there to make it feel soft. Well, I don't know if you can see, but like on her front foot on the top photo there, there's a lot of what they call flocking rubs where it's rubbed off, and so there's no way to fix that. Like you can reflock a pony, but you have to take everything off and then completely reflock it. You can't just do that area.
Remember like Moss Man from He-Man, the action figure? He's covered in like green fuzzy. Same thing.
Yeah. So my goal with this one was to deflock this pony, fix her hair, and she has a huge hole in her foot, which I'll show you in a second, and fix that and repaint it. So I had to remove her head, take her tail out, boil her in OxyClean, just scrape for like probably 30-45 minutes to scrape all that flocking off because it softens the glue, the boiling, and it's really hot. So I'm sitting there going, ow, 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 ow. And then I also actually did a process where I used acetone, went outside, put acetone over it, and not over the painted areas, removed the rest of the flocking. I used some Jasco, which is like a paint stripper, oddly, but it doesn't take the paint off of the pony. So I got all of the flocking off. That's the hole in the foot. Once I deflocked her, I used Epoxy Sculpt, which is sort of like the modeling clay that you bake in the oven, like Sculpey or Fimo, but you don't have to bake it. So it basically just cures to sandable within about 24 hours. So that was really useful because I didn't really want to stick her in the oven. And then I just tried to match the paint as closely as possible, and she looks pretty darn good compared to, Now this is a pony that would have been what they call a bait pony. In My Little Pony world, they take ponies and they customize them, even the original ones from the 80s sometimes. And so I was trying to basically bring this pony back to a point where someone would potentially want her. I think for me, and certainly within the pony community, you just want to be really transparent in the fact that this is what you've done. You don't want to try to pass something like this off as being original because obviously she's got work done to her. So, you have to try to be honest.
So completion restorations, we call it this because it's not anything where you're doing any real cosmetic work. You're not necessarily having to do a lot of functional work to it. They're probably the most satisfying restorations because after you go through the process, everything's original, nothing's been modified. In the attempt to repair something, you haven't broken something else. There's no risk involved. But it usually involves cobbling together two different examples into one functional or complete one. So on the top level, we have the top photo. We have a Mask Boulder Hill playset from 1985 from Kenner. It came to me in a pile of dusty old parts. On the bottom, we have a fun little vehicle. It's a generic for 3 3/4-inch action figures. It's called the Arco. It's by Arco. It's called the MCB1 Bigfoot. It was in all the Sears Wishbook, JCPenney Wishbook catalogs in the 80s. And what we had to do was one of them didn't have a battery compartment. It wasn't rolling anymore. And in the case of the Boulder Hill gas station, it was just grossly incomplete. So what we're going to do here is we just simply replaced all the parts on the gas station that were missing, which involved cobbling together 2 or 3 or finding individual pieces. For the Arco, what we did was we took those 2 that I showed you, and we took the existing electronics out of the one that was otherwise cracked and broken on the exterior, and we put them on the one that was aesthetically perfect, but its internals had just given up the ghost. So these are my favorite kind of restorations because when you come out the other side, they're as new. There's nothing that's been done to them that you will stare at for the rest of your life and go, I don't remember when I did that repair. Like it's not like that at all. Yes, Reproductions. So with the advent of 3D printing, and even before that, with just enterprising people who really wanted to figure out how to work with plastic, going all the way back to the 90s, reproduction accessories and stickers have been everywhere and for a very long time. And my general rule of thumb, for me personally, I don't judge anyone who wants to have repros in their personal collection. I do judge you if you try and sell it as an original. That's really annoying. But some people are cool with saying, you know what, I've got 50 vintage Star Wars figures. None of them have their little guns anymore. I want to display them with guns. I don't want to pay the price to get originals. They're hard to find and they're expensive. I'm going to go buy a big pile of the repros off eBay from, what's the guy, Blue Snagman, I think is the seller's name. And I'm going to be happy. Well, that's cool. If that's what makes you happy, that's awesome. The moment you put that out into the market, though, and say, I've got a complete vintage Stormtrooper, it's like, no, you don't. You got a Stormtrooper with a replica gun. So it's not really complete, is it? Oh, wait, I'm showing my geek face, aren't I? However, in some cases, so that's what we call fraudulent restoration. But in some cases, I think replicas are kind of a fun addition to your collection. On the top photo, there's a guy out of England. I think he's in England. He's called his company name is Revalvit, and he figured out how to recreate the lightsabers for the vintage Star Wars figures, the slide sabers. And what he did was he recreated the super rare double telescoping lightsabers that were only on the market for like a biscuit of a second, and then they pulled them because they were too complicated, and then they just had the weird like bent tip lightsabers that were solid. But I had never known those lightsabers to exist because I was a kid. I was too young. When I found out about them and then found out that they were, you know, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 a find, I was like, oh, well, I'm never going to own them anyway. So, but I'd really love to see how they work because they look so cool. Well, he offered up replicas of them, and I said, I would really like to have some of those for my display because I want to see how those work. I want to fiddle with that, see how it works. I was very careful, and I said, okay, guys, I've just gotten these Revolvet double telescoping lightsaber replicas. What you'll notice is, with the exception of Darth Vader, but there's a caveat with that one, I put the double telescoping lightsaber for Luke with a brown hair variant Luke Skywalker that was made later during the Empire Strikes Back run in 1980 and through the rest of the line. There were no brown-haired Luke Skywalkers that ever came with a double telescoping lightsaber. They were all yellow-haired variants. Same with Ben Kenobi. The Ben Kenobi is my childhood Ben Kenobi, so I'm never going to get rid of him anyway. And he has the gray hair. Well, only the white-haired Ben Kenobis that were the first originals had that double telescoping lightsaber. There are no gray-haired Ben Kenobis that we know of that ever had that. In the case of Darth Vader, he's my childhood Darth Vader. I'm never going to get rid of him. Even if you tried to take him from me at gunpoint, I would lose my life before I gave him to you. So,
it's good to have priorities, you know?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, 3D printing is starting to become very prevalent with creating parts and things for toys that are often broken. Like a lot of toys have weak points, like the original Matchbox Voltron diecast that has the lions come together to form the big robot. The black lion has a neck joint that's made out of thin plastic, so the lion's head when he's a lion and then the head comes down to form Voltron, that pivot point, that hinge right there snaps a lot because it's really fragile. Well, people are saying we can now 3D print those again, and you have a fully functional part in black plastic, and you can repair your toy perfectly. It'll function exactly to the dimensions that it was originally spec'd for. Or in the case of the die-cast Y-wing fighters and Star Destroyers from Kenner in the 70s, they have these tiny little, like, one of them has the little blockade runner that sticks on the bottom, and one of them has a little bomb, and they're like this big, and everyone lost them. And you can recreate those now and complete your die-cast piece. Is it putting the market at risk? What are your thoughts?
So this goes right into what we're talking about, is should we restore, and is there a point at which you shouldn't restore? Right.
In the case of this example, much like the G.I. Joe figures with the rubber O-rings inside them that eventually dry rot no matter if they're mint on card or not, and same with the He-Man figures, foam pieces in toys are notorious. It doesn't matter if it's still in the box or not. 30 years down the line, that foam is going to start falling into dust. This is a Dagobah playset from the Empire Strikes Back line from Kenner. It has a foam swamp that is notorious for just crumbling into a gooey mess just because time goes on. It has nothing to do with how you store it. It has nothing to do with whether you keep it out of the light or not. Like some toys are vampiric.
It's like the Stretch Armstrong.
Yeah, some toys are vampiric where you don't want them in the light. Well, in the case of this one, aside from some minor discoloration that could happen if it was in the sunlight, the foam itself isn't going to be really affected by that, but it just falls apart. And we decided that, well, it's ugly and it's going to keep falling apart. There's no point in keeping the little chunks around that are still there. So there was this person out of the Northeast that sells these great, they're like time-proof repros. They're a felt piece with some rubber backers on them, foam rubber, and they fit right in, and it's great and it'll never fall apart. So that's one example where we felt like, yeah, you know what, we're going to restore this because otherwise it's just fugly. So yeah. Let me explain this to you. So for those of you who may not collect or are familiar with Megos, the Mego superheroes of the 70s, they came in a number of varieties. Certain types of restoration are unavoidable, and by default they will also affect the overall value, but the value is already affected anyway because of the nature of this beast. So in the case of this, what you're looking at here is you're looking at a Linda Carter edition Mego Wonder Woman doll from 1976.
It's kind of like just a classic Barbie doll that's been painted.
Right.
To me. But
Right. Yeah. And it has the painted corset, which is different. Some of them came with that actual cloth halter top corset. This is a painted one.
Looks like season 1.
Yeah, and it has still has the tiara. You can't see in the photo, but she still has the bracelets and the boots and everything like that. But you notice this nastiness around her shoulders. You see this.
Crusty stuff.
Yes. Well, the friend of mine who loaned me this toy. This was a toy he had when he was in childhood. And anyway, that's actually a chemical reaction. That's melt. That's not glue.
Really?
Yeah, so you have to actually razor blade that off to fix the toy. And in doing so, you're taking material off the toy. So sometimes it's unavoidable. To save the value of it or to save its functionality, you have to affect the integrity of the materials to do so. Because the toy's eating itself alive anyway.
And like we were saying, the integrity of the materials, if you're using chemical processes to clean something, you don't know necessarily what you're doing to it long term.
And so that bubbling around is from him attempting.
No, it's
No,
from
it's
two
just
different
from two different
materials
types
of
of
plastic
plastic sitting
touching each other
together.
over time and having a chemical reaction.
It's just a
And then-
slow chemical reaction.
Right.
The arm, it looks like it's different materials.
Right.
Yeah, it's more of like a softer plastic than the body is a harder plastic.
Will her arm still articulate?
They will after you razor it off. They won't right now. They're frozen. So.
Yeah, and
but
like you said, we thought it was glue because it looks like someone glued her arm back on, but
what are we at on time?
we got five minutes.
Well, don't we need to clear out soon because of the next?
Yeah. So anyway, I think you have. Yeah, that's it.
That's really the end of the presentation. We just kind of wanted to go through it and just kind of get you guys an overview of all the things that people are going through with toy restorations right now and what you have to look out for. And I hope this was interesting to you. I appreciate you guys showing up and thank you for being here.
Side.